My name is Hassan. I'm a developer advocate at Vercel, and I'm just very excited to be here today to talk to you all about how to build headless e-commerce applications using Next.js and Swell. So I'm honestly like building e-commerce applications. There's so many ways to do it, and it can be really, really difficult at times. And so I just want to show you all how simple it is to get an e-commerce store built and up and running using technologies like Next.js and Swell. So I'm going to briefly talk about Next.js and Vercel, and then we're going to introduce Swell and the whole headless e-commerce movement. And then we're going to do some live coding, which will be, the majority of this talk. And we'll also be covering on-demand incremental static regeneration, which is a new and exciting Next.js feature. So what is Next.js? I'm assuming most of you all have heard about it, and that's why you're here. But if you haven't, it's one of the easiest and most popular ways to build production-ready React applications. It's just a React framework. And it's really been growing at a truly incredible rate in the past few years with small startups, everybody, everybody using it, from small startups to large enterprises. And so, as I mentioned, I work for Vercel, which is a front-end cloud platform. We have this mantra called develop, preview, ship that I want to talk about really, really fast. So on the develop side, we kind of help developers develop applications using whatever tools they're most comfortable with. And then we enable them to collaborate with others using tools like preview URLs that you can kind of share with your team and collaborate on until you're happy with the final result. And then all you have to do is git push, commit to your main branch, and Vercel handles all of the rest. It'll immediately be available on Vercel's global edge network, and you get a deployed application with a URL, as we'll see kind of at the end of this talk. And Vercel really just takes care of a lot of the boring stuff for you, setting up domains, DNS, SSL encryption, caching, validation, all of that stuff. And it just lets front-end developers focus on what they do best, which is creating applications. And then we're also the creators of Next.js at Vercel. So now that I've kind of intro Next.js and Vercel, let's talk about headless e-commerce for a second. Headless e-commerce is the idea of decoupling the head or the front end of your website from the back end. And so this means instead of using something like Shopify for both your data and your storefront, you would use a solution like Shopify or Swell, which we'll talk about in a second, for your data and APIs, and then you would use a separate front end like Next.js. And the reason why so many companies are moving towards this approach is because of how much flexibility it provides to add things like third-party scripts and, kind of tweak your website exactly how you want it and see big performance gains. So on this topic of headless, Swell is a headless e-commerce backend that gives developers the tools they need to build these great e-commerce applications. And more concretely, it gives us the ability to store our products with an API and the ability to get those products and perform various actions like adding them to a cart or checking out, and a whole lot more. And we're going to see Swell in action during our live coding portion, which will actually start right now. So, and just a reminder to drop all of your questions in Q&A. I'll get to them kind of, throughout the talk. Thanks, Amy, for sending that to everybody as well. So let's actually hop onto this code. We can get rid of this waiting.md. And this is our starter code. So I'm gonna go over this. We can start with pages because that's kind of the entry point for Next.js applications. And inside of pages, you can see we have our app.js and our document.js, nothing special there. And then we have our index.js, which is going to be our homepage. Let me actually make this a little smaller and grab our demo as well and put it right next to it. So this is our demo right here. Let me open up index.js so we can see what's going on actually in here. So all we're doing is we're importing a header and a footer from our components folder. So the header is over here, and this is the footer down here. And then we have an H1 that has crafted by us for you right there. And then we have a CSS grid over here where we're going to display data, right? So nothing is here right now. We're going to pull this data from Swell and then display it on the page over here so people can shop for coffee and get what they want. So before I move on, actually, I realized I didn't introduce Tailwind. So we're going to be using Tailwind CSS as our CSS framework. If you've never heard of Tailwind, it's a utility-based CSS framework that essentially just gives us a lot of these easy-to-use classes. You can think of Tailwind as just a huge CSS file with a ton of classes predefined, and we can just come in here and use them without needing to open up a CSS file, create a class, write some CSS, import it in here, and then use it. it's just kind of, I find it easier to kind of just plug these class names. The con of that is kind of just that your JS6 can get pretty cluttered like this. It might get a little hard to read, but that's kind of the trade-off. Someone asked, do I prefer Tailwind over other CSS solutions? I generally do for things like, especially for simple sites, or if I'm working on a project by myself. For larger projects, I know a lot of people like to use, styled components or CSS modules. And it's definitely kind of whatever your team or your company uses and whatever works best for kind of your use case. Yeah, I prefer Tailwind. A lot of people are moving towards Tailwind these days just because it's very, very easy to especially to prototype new websites. As you can imagine, like, I don't have to move off of this page. I can just be in here and I can add divs and I can style things and import components and do anything I want without needing to kind of switch context and go to a different CSS file. So that's why I personally like it. So moving on, this is our index.js. Let's take a look at our components actually for a second. We have 3 here. We have our header, which is, and this is what I mean about Tailwind potentially cluttering up the page. But all you have to know is we have an image over here that is acting as a background image. So that's this image in the background. We have some text, the coffee house and life is better with coffee. We have a button that doesn't really do anything right now. And that's about it for our header. For our footer, just very simple. It says powered by Next.js, Swell, and Vercel, and it actually links to the source code. So this is where you'll find all the code that we're going to talk about today. And then finally, we have a product card component, which essentially it has some logic over here, but you don't have to really know anything about this logic. All it does is it kind of lets our images load in with this cool blur effect, which we'll see later on. But all it essentially does is we have an image that it shows. It's going to be an image of the product, and then there's going to be some information about the product, right underneath it. So we're going to have specifically the product name, the price, and then the number of calories. And so we'll import this when we get our data from Swell. So those are 3 components. Again, we're just importing them into our homepage. We're displaying them over here. And that is all. We have a public folder, which just contains our an image, which is just this background image right here. And then we have a styles folder that just tells our application that, hey, we want to use Tailwind, and we also want to use this custom font. So that is it for our starter code. We can go ahead and start coding. So let's go to our README, because I actually defined a little agenda that I'll maybe go through before we continue. So I'm going to close my sidebar, and VS Code has this cool thing actually where you can preview READMEs in this format, which is nice because it's just easier to read. So we're going to intro Next.js, Swell, and Tailwind. We actually just did that. We're going to do a walkthrough of our starter code. We just did that as well. And the next thing we're going to do is connect Swell to our app. So we want to connect Swell, we want to display our products over here, and then we want to build dynamic individual pages, which I'll go through when we get to it. And then I want to talk about data fetching in general in Next.js. How do you optimize for the best user and developer experience when you're dealing with, static data and dynamic data and all this kind of stuff. So we're going to talk about some different ways of rendering data. And then we're going to talk about on-demand ISR, which is a pretty exciting new feature, and we're going to implement it. And then we're just going to deploy to Vercel. So let's do it. Someone is asking Swell versus Sanity. I honestly have not used Sanity much. As far as I know, it's mostly a CMS. Swell gives us very specific things for e-commerce. So it's optimized for building, custom checkout flows and being able to do discounts and subscriptions and all of that kind of stuff. But great question. Okay, so we're going to move on to connecting Swell. So I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to close up this README. And the first thing we have to do to connect to Swell is install the Swell library. So I'm going to open up my terminal, and I'm going to open up a new terminal, and I'm going to do npm install swell-js. So this is the specific kind of Swell library that enables us to interact with it. And the second thing we want to do is define a swell.js file and kind of init Swell, so we can import it in different components and actually use that API, right? So we're going to go create a new file, and we're going to call it swell.js. And inside this file, we're going to import Swell from swell-js, which is this library that we just installed. And then we have to use the swell.init function. And in here, we're passing in two variables. We're going to pass in our store ID and then our store like API key as well. And we can get these from Swell. So let me actually head over to Swell and let's actually go over this really quick. So this is Swell right over here. I've defined some products. I have 8 coffees specifically over here. And if we click into any one of them, we can see that I defined a product name. I uploaded an image. I defined a price, and then I defined calories and a description down here. So that's all I did. Came to Swell, created an account, clicked new product, created these 8 products manually. And that's all we've kind of done. If we go to developer and then API keys, this is where we're going to see our API keys that we want. So our store ID, Hassan-Coffee, and then this is our public key for our storefront. So we're going to want to grab both of those and put them inside of, we're basically going to put these as environment variables. So I'm going to go back to my code, and we're not going to put them right here. We're actually going to go ahead and create a .env file. So I'm just going to do .env. We're going to actually have these copied already. So I'm going to declare both my environment variables. We're prefixing with next_public, so we can access them in the browser if we want to as well. And then we're just going to grab both of these and put them inside our init function right here. So to access environment variables, we do process.env.whatever, or is it, excuse me. Yeah, process.env.whatever name it is. So we're going to grab the store ID, right? Process.env.store ID. And then we're going to do the same thing for the public key. I'm going to grab that. And there we go. We've initted Swell right now. And now we can just export default Swell. And that's kind of all we have to do on the Swell side to make it work. Now we can import Swell in any of our pages and use it to actually grab data. So we're going to do that. We're going to go to our index.js. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to use a function called getStaticProps. And this function, Next.js gives it to us, and it only runs on build time on the server. So it runs essentially before our page is rendered, and then we can, whatever data gets returned from that function, it gets in as props to our main component, to our main home component. So I'm going to go ahead and start defining that. So we're going to do export async function getStaticProps. Cannot type today. And we are going to use that Swell API to get all of our products, right? So we're going to create a variable called Swell products, and we can do await swell.products.list. Oh God, swell.products.list. So this is how we can grab all the products. So now we have them in Swell products. And now all we want to do is we want to return the props. So this is the way we typically do that. We do data, and then we want our data to be Swell products, right? And yeah, this will return all these Swell products over here. And now we can actually play with them down here, right? We can do whatever we want with the data. We can display it. We're actually just going to console.log it for now. Console.log. The data is, and then we're going to say data. And actually, I just realized I forgot to import Swell. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Import Swell from that specific file, right? So we're going to go out into the pages, into the main folder, and then grab them from Swell. So it's going to be from Swell like that. And then, yeah, we can kill this terminal over here. We can go back to our main app over here. Going to make it, oh, store is not configured. That is weird. Let's just, I think we just had to reload because we installed the package. And there we go. We're going to open up our terminal, and there we go. We get the data. There's this object, and we can see that this object has an array called results, and it has 8 things, which is great because, going back to Swell, we have 8 products right here. So we have a results array, and each of these is an object. We can see they have like an ID, they have the description, which we have, they have our name, we have an image, we have we're getting all the information from right here, which is amazing. That's exactly what we want. So we are gonna close that. We don't need that anymore. And now we can actually display this data in this format over here. Let me actually go, okay. No other questions. To display the data, what we're going to do is we're going to say, if data exists, then we want to map over. We don't want to map over data, but we want to map over the results, because if you can remember, data over here is this object, and then everything is inside of this results array, right? So we're going to do, if data exists, we're going to map through results. So data.results.map. And then for each product, over here, we want to display this product card component that we talked about, right? And this takes product as a prop, if you remember, and then it displays, that image and the name and the price and the calories at the bottom. So we're gonna just pass in these two things to our product card component. So we're gonna say product card, product equals product, right? And then we have to give it an ID or a key rather, so it doesn't error out, because this is so key equals product.id, because that's unique. We're going to close our component. We're going to import it actually at the top over here. So product card, right? We're going to save, and then we're going to get rid of this console.log. We're going to close that over there. And I think we forgot some parentheses over here. Let's actually troubleshoot. So we have a product. We are returning this product key right here. I think we just have to use these brackets over here. So when we return this, sorry, running into these weird issues. I needed 2 parentheses over here. So again, we're displaying the data over here. If we go back to our store, we can see that, bam, there we go. We get our 8 products. And you can see they kind of load with this like blur in state, which is on purpose if I reload. And that was the logic that I kind of did. And there we go. We're grabbing all of these 8 products from Swell. We're displaying them here with some information, and that works, right? So that's awesome. We've connected our application to Swell. So let's go back to our README. We have successfully done this step over here, connect Swell to our app to display products. And now we can move on to the next step, which is building these dynamic individual pages. And so what do I mean by that? What I mean by, that's so cool. Thank you. Thank you. What I mean by building dynamic pages is, now that we have pulled all of these products from Swell, we want to be able to purchase them, right? And so ideally, the flow that we want to go to is we want to be able to click on a product. We want to go to an individual product page that gives us some more information about the product, maybe the description, because we haven't used that yet. And then on that individual product page, we'll have like a checkout button that we can click on and actually purchase the copy, right? So that's what we want to build. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to create something called a dynamic route in Next.js. So we're going to go to our pages folder. We're going to create a new folder called products. And inside of this products folder, we're going to create a slug.js in this form. And I'll go over what this does in a second. So essentially what this does is it tells Next.js, okay, if the user navigates to localhost or like whatever the URL is /products/ whatever it is, I want you to render this page, So we can go ahead and like export default function product, and we'll say return this. This is a product page. This is just for testing purposes so we can see that it works. I'm going to go ahead and click enter, and we can see that there we go. We get our product page. It doesn't matter what we have after products. Any route after products, it will render this specific page. And what's cool about Next.js is we can get whatever's in here. We can actually access that inside of our code and do things with it. So what we want to do specifically is we're going to have some kind of number ID over here. And this number ID is going to be specific to a Swell product. And so inside of this specific page, we're going to say, okay, whatever ID that the user navigated to, that's the product that we want to display. So let's actually go back. And over here on our main page, right? We want the user to be able to click one of these and go to something. So we want to go to the product card component, and we're actually going to add a link. We're going to wrap this in a link over here. And actually, right before we do that, this errored out because link is not defined. So let's go ahead and import link at the top. So import link from next-link. And inside of this link over here, all we have to do is pass in an href, and we want to direct the user to go to basically /product/ whatever ID that specific thing leads to, right? As we talked about. So we're going to do /products/ and then we have, product as a prop over here. So we can access specific things about this product. So we can say product.id, for example. And we're actually just going to go ahead and make this anchor tag just to make link happy. We're going to save, and look at that. Now these are actually clickable. And when we click it, we go to that product page, which is awesome. Like, this is what we want. And so now we can actually go into that specific dynamic route and build out this page, right? So we're going to need to do a few things here. The first thing we want to do is actually grab that information. So we're also going to use get static props here. So we're going to do export async function get static props. And get static props can actually take in something called params. And that's actually how we access this part of that URL. We can access it using params.slug. So params.slug is what we can do. And we're going to use this in a second. So over here, actually, we want to import Swell as well. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. Import Swell from, let's see, we have to go back 2 times now from Swell. And inside of here, we're going to, we want to grab information about that specific product, as we mentioned. So we're going to define another variable called Swell product, just a singular product. And we're going to use that Swell API. And to do that, we're going to do await swell.products.get. That's the specific API method that we want to use. And then we pass in params.slug, right? So this is that unique ID that if we click iced coffee, iced coffee has this specific ID. It's the 6, whatever. But this is a unique identifier, and we're then, asking Swell to return everything pertaining to that specific ID. So after we get that information, all we have to do is return it as props. So we can get rid of that, and we can return and say props. Our product is going to be this Swell product variable that we just defined, right? So in dynamic routes, we actually need something else to make this work as well. We also need a get static paths function. So I'm actually just going to copy paste this code in and then talk about it. So with get static paths function, we essentially need to tell Next.js what routes to pre-render. What routes to pre-render in advance. So what we're doing here is we're grabbing all the Swell products, we're creating an array, and we're looping through the products, and we're essentially adding, that unique ID inside of this full paths array. And then we're returning it in this function. What this tells Next.js is, hey, here are the paths I want you to pre-render. We have 8 products, and so we have 8 pages that I want you to statically pre-render. You might be asking, why are we doing this? The reason is we only have 8 products, and when we pre-render them, they're just very, very, very fast because they're static files that are cached. Next.js doesn't have to do any work with like fetching the data when the user goes to the page. It's already there. They click on it and it'll appear. And we'll go over, how fast this makes things in a second. I'm actually just going to copy paste some code because I don't want to spend a lot of time here just going and writing Tailwind, because I want to make the main focus Next.js. So I just copied all of this code in. I see there's something in chat. Very nice explanation. Thank you. So let's just recap what we did really quickly here. Actually, we need to import a few things that I'm missing. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And then I'll explain what's going on here. So, and don't worry about this error. We'll resolve it in a second. We have our get static props function, right? This grabs that specific, that specific product from Swell, and it returns it. We have our get static paths function, which just pre-renders, those 8 routes that we have. And then we have our product function. And in this function, we have our image, and we have like our product name and our product price. We have a button called checkout that uses this checkout function that we haven't done yet. We're going to live code in a second. And then we have a description at the bottom here, right? So that's what's going on. Anita says, it'd be great to get a recording of this webinar because you explained it really well. Thank you. I appreciate that. A recording will be emailed to everybody right after this talk. So don't worry about that. Okay, so now that we have our main product page, we want to actually go over this checkout function. But let's go through this error first of all. It says cannot read properties of undefined, and it's over here. Let's actually reload this page. There we go. Okay, all we have to do is reload. So this is our product page, right? We can see that we have an image over here. We have a name, we have a price, we have a checkout button, and a description. And again, this works for all pages by default, which is super cool, right? We were just at iced coffee. Let's press double espresso. And when we click that, it'll grab that specific data. Again, you know, it checks the URL, it sees that ID, it queries Swell, it gets that specific product info, and then it feeds it as a prop to our main component, and then that renders it, which is amazing. But this checkout function over here, we haven't implemented this yet. So if we click on it, you know, we get this error that checkout is not defined. So let's go ahead and implement this checkout function, and I'll show you how easy Swell makes it to like, you know, make this a fully functioning e-commerce store. So let's go ahead and define an async function called checkout over here. And we can see down here that it takes in a product ID. So I'm gonna make it take in a prop. So now we want to do three things here. We want to clear the cart. We want to add the current item to the cart, because Swell kind of operates on a cart, you know, principle. And what we could do is we could build like a cart component, and then you can add multiple components, and then you can check out after. But just you know, just to keep things simple, we're just going to check out directly from here. So what we want to do is we want to clear the cart, we want to add the current item to the cart, and then we want to actually like navigate to the checkout URL. And Swell actually gives us a specific checkout URL, so we don't have to build that flow, you know? So to clear the cart, we're just going to be using, you know, Swell APIs for this, and we imported Swell at the top, so we're good to do this. We're going to do await swell.cart.set items, and we pass it in an empty array. This just clears the cart. To add the current item to the cart, it's going to be similar, swell.cart.add items this time, and we can specify a bunch of things here. But what we need is our product ID, which is just our product ID that's going to be passed in, you know, to our function over here. Right there, right? We're going to grab that, and then we're also going to grab the quantity. And again, you know, we could add a counter here where we could, you know, order 6 different coffees, and you know, all of those go through. So now that we've added the current item to the cart, the last thing we need to do is navigate to that checkout URL. So I'm actually going to define a cart variable, which is going to grab some information from Swell. So it's going to do await swell.cart.get. And then we're going to, so we've grabbed some information from Swell in this cart variable, and the checkout URL is actually in cart.checkout_URL. So what we want to do is we want to tell Next.js, hey, when someone clicks this checkout button, navigate to this specific URL. So we do that using router.push. So pretty simple, but that's how the Next.js router knows to go to that specific route. And I just realized we forgot to define a router. So we're going to go ahead and do that right here. We're going to say, we're just going to define a router. Const router equals use router. And I think I imported that at the top. Use router, save. Yeah, there we go. Use router is right there. Cool. Let's see, let's check the Q&A. Giorgio says, why did you make the checkout function async? The answer to that is just that Swell needs it to be async. We're awaiting all of these Swell calls, and to do that, we need to make sure that the whole function is async. Okay, so now that we did all that, let's actually go and open this up in full screen so we can see and test that this hopefully works. Let's go back to our main page. We're going to click on something iced coffee, for example, and then we're going to click checkout. And we're going to wait, and we have an error because I don't know what I did. Let's go back here and see what's going on. We have await swell.cart.add items. Oh, okay. This is just supposed to be add item. That's why it's erroring out. We'll go back, reload the page. We'll click checkout, and look at that. Swell directs us to this specific URL, which is what we wanted. Right? They essentially, they're going to give us a URL so we can go and check out. And there we go. We have our cart right here. It says iced coffee. It says this is our total. It's $5. I'm actually going to go ahead and fill out this information, even though that might be slow, just to show you all that, like, you know, this is a fully, we now have a fully functioning e-commerce application, with relatively little code, just taking advantage of Swell and its APIs, we can do that. So I'm going to put in a test credit card number, and we're just going to put in random dates as well. 27 4444. We're going to put in some a billing address, and we're going to grab like a random thing, complete order. And it says our order is being submitted, and that's it. Thank you for the purchase. Everything went through. This would actually work for a real card and a real address and everything. And what's even cooler is we can go back into Swell and we can go to our orders, and we can see that right now it's 11:34 a.m. or 12:34. But we can see that we've just completed this. We paid. We've got our iced tea. And we get, specific information about, who bought it and how it works and everything. So there it is. We just we built this fully functioning e-commerce store in about a half an hour. Let's go back to our README. Now that that's done, that's great, but we can do even better, actually. And I want to talk about data fetching methods in Next.js. Before I move on, if you all have any questions, please feel free to drop them. I'm kind of checking Q&A every few minutes. But all right, it looks like we're good. Oh, someone is asking, can we have crypto payments with Swell? I actually have no idea. That's a good question. I don't think so. I don't think I saw that as an option. But yeah, maybe maybe check out the Swell website or reach out to the team and they can help with that. Obaid asks, is the Swell checkout page customizable? Absolutely, absolutely. I just use the default one that they have. You can do so many custom things in a custom checkout flow where you can ask specific questions in checkout, or you can require certain things. Like it's really, really cool. And I've just scratched the surface of what you can do with Swell, honestly. Awesome. Thank you all for the questions. It's super engaging. I appreciate that. So let's move on to talking about, we're going to talk about data fetching in Next.js and we're going to compare different data fetching techniques. And then we're going to actually implement on-domain ISR. And we'll go over why this is really, really cool, specifically for e-commerce applications. And then we'll go ahead and deploy to Vercel. So nearing the end here. Let's keep going. So data fetching in Next.js. You can see that. So let me kind of start at the beginning, right? We want to achieve the best user and developer experience with our application, especially when dealing with kind of dynamic and static data like we are in our current application. So one thing we could have done here is we could have done client-side rendering using something like useEffect or SWR or something like that, that fetches on the client side. The issue with that is that, it could introduce layout shift, which is bad for core web vitals. And we just need additional like loading and fetching logic. And the biggest one is that it runs on every single request, which is actually kind of slow. And we want to avoid that, mostly because, our products aren't going to be updating every second. This isn't like, we're not building like a stock market trading app that, updates every millisecond and, on every single request, we need new data. We want to, everything that can be static should be static. Right. So in our case, we don't want to use client-side rendering because of that. We could also do, server-side rendering with get server-side props, and that kind of runs on every request as well. But it has that same issue of, running on every single request. We ideally want it to be static. And so that brings us to our third method, which is static generation. And that's actually what we did in our application, right? We used get static props, which runs on the server at build time, meaning only when I like push a change to my application and Vercel or whatever I'm using, rebuilds my application, that's when I'm going to get new data. And that's awesome. That means your app is going to be pretty fast. And we actually haven't really seen how fast it can be because everything that I've been showing you all in localhost is not really accurate, because when you're developing locally, Next.js runs this get static props on every single request. So to actually show how this behaves in a production environment, we're going to build locally and then run our production server right after this is built. To show you all a sense of just how it's going to behave after we deploy this. So first of all, actually, I want to point out that you can see that Next.js says that it generated all of these static pages, right? And that's because of the if we go to our slug.js, our get static paths function, right? We generated all those 8 product pages, which is awesome. So now we're going to do npm run start, and we're going to open up localhost. And essentially over here, we can see that like on a new page load, like this is super fast. This is static content. Even on a new product, just like watch this. Like you click on it and it's there, right? Like it's practically instantaneous, right? Like you click on it, you know, that's because Next.js doesn't have to do any sort of computation. This is run already at build time, which is great. But the big issue here is that we need to rebuild our site every single time we want to update content. So let's say, for example, I go back to Swell and, you know, this is a real store. I'm getting a ton of orders. Let's say I'm running a big sale and I run out of my iced coffees. You know, they're out. I don't want people to buy them anymore. And so I can go in Swell and I can deactivate it over here and I can save. But now if someone goes to my store and like goes back and clicks on iced coffee, they see it, which is not good. We don't want them to see iced coffee in here. And the reason that is because, you know, we didn't rebuild our site. We have to rebuild the site and then it'll update. So you can see this is kind of bad. This is a bad user experience because iced coffee is currently out of stock. I've indicated to my headless e-commerce provider that, hey, I want iced coffee to be out of stock, but it's still displaying on my website. New users are still seeing iced coffee as an option. So, you know, what if we could have a static site, but be able to update these static pages after we've already built our site? And this is where incremental static regeneration comes in, which kind of allows us to use static generation on a per page level without needing to rebuild our site. So I'm going to go over, and it's super, super simple to add this. All you have to do is go to your index.js, and we're going to go to our get static props function, and we're just going to add a revalidate prop. So we're going to revalidate 10 seconds. What this does is it just will render the page a maximum of once every 10 seconds. It will kind of rerun this get static props function a maximum of once every 10 seconds and give us updated data. So let's go back. We're going to build again and run it, and then we'll kind of see this in action. npm run start. Okay, we have our local host. Let's save. Okay, so it updates because we've rebuilt, right? There's nothing special about that. But now if we go and we activate it and we save and we go back and we reload, we don't see it here. And the reason is, as I said, incremental static regeneration, we set a revalidate prop of 10 seconds, meaning it will not update, you know, like twice every 10 seconds. The maximum it will update is once every 10 seconds. So we have to wait that 10 seconds. And then when a new user comes in and reloads, there we go. Now we see it, which is pretty awesome, right? We didn't have to rebuild our site. It just works. So this method is really, really, really great for e-commerce applications because of that. But the con of it is that you get a lot of unnecessary regenerations, right? Every 10 seconds, it can trigger a maximum of once every 10 seconds. So if you are getting a ton of users in your site, you might get your page regenerated, you know, hundreds of times a day or whatever the amount is. Yeah, sale while revalidate. It's amazing. You might get your page regenerating a ton of times where you're actually updating it maybe 3 times a day. So, you know, that's why it's not kind of the perfect solution because of these unnecessary regenerations. But what if we could tell our Next.js site exactly when to regenerate certain pages? You know, what if we could say, only when I go to Swell and make a change on my product, then I want you to regenerate the page. And luckily, we came out with a new feature to incremental static regeneration that allows us to do just that. Tell Next.js when to regenerate certain pages on demand, right? So as I mentioned, like our ideal experience is changing a product in Swell and having it instantly change in our application. We don't want to worry about a revalidate period. We don't want to worry about rebuilding our site. We just want it to work right away, right? And so this is exactly what on-demand ISR helps us solve. We are going to go ahead and see this in action. So to use on-demand ISR, what we have to do is go and create an API endpoint. So to do that in Next.js, all we have to do is go to our pages directory, open a new folder. We're going to call this API. And then inside of this, we can define any API endpoint we want. So we're going to call ours revalidate. Revalidate.js. I have some code that I'm going to paste in, and then I'll explain it. Let's do that. So this is just a typical API endpoint. And what we have here, we have some authentication here. What we're doing here is we're saying this isn't going to make much sense now, actually, so I'll explain it at the end. But we're doing some authentication here. That's all you need to know. And then what we're doing is we're using this unstable revalidate API from Next.js to revalidate the page. So we're saying, okay, when this API endpoint is called, excuse me, when this API endpoint is called, I want you to regenerate my homepage. But not only that, I want you to regenerate that specific product page that I'm in, which is really, really powerful. Again, we're choosing what pages we want to regenerate, what specific pages we want to regenerate. This isn't going to rebuild our whole site. It's not going to do any unnecessary computations. It's going to regenerate just the homepage and the specific product page that was updated, which is extremely cool. And then it's just going to, either return success or an error, depending on if it worked or not. So going back to this authentication code over here, what this is going to do is it's going to check. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a webhook in Swell. Swell allows us to create a webhook that essentially says, when a product is updated, I want you to fire off this webhook. So that webhook will then trigger this API endpoint, and it's going to send a secret from the webhook, just so this API endpoint knows that, okay, Swell is sending this to me. This is legitimate. I'm going to regenerate the site. So it checks that secret that comes from the Swell webhook that we're going to define against an environment variable that we're going to define called revalidate secret. So let's actually go ahead and add this to our .env file. So we're going to go to .env and say revalidate secret equals testing, let's say, right? It's just that you can put any password in there. But essentially it's gonna say, okay, is the secret coming from Swell also the same as my revalidate secret locally? And if it's not the same, it just returns right away and it says invalid token. I'm not going to regenerate. I'm not going to do anything. And if it is successful, it moves on and it actually regenerates the pages. So before we do anything, actually, let us deploy this to Vercel first, and then we'll go ahead and create that webhook in Swell, and we'll show how this works. So we're going to go ahead to, I'm going to go to vercel.com. I'm going to click new project. We're going to import my GitHub repository, which I pushed that code to GitHub, so I don't need to do that again. And I just need to grab my environment variables. So I'm going to do that right now. We're going to go to our .env file, and we're going to grab all these and paste them in. So our next public store ID, our public key, and our revalidate secret environment variable. And click testing, and we're going to click deploy. It already exists. Let's actually call this coffee app, and then deploy. Make this bigger. There it is. It's deploying. While I wait, should take about 30 or 40 seconds. While I wait, let's actually go to Swell and create the webhook. So we're going to go to webhooks over here, and then we're going to add a webhook. And we'll put the domain here that we get from Vercel, right? But I'm just going to do like domain.com for now. And then it's going to be /API/revalidate, right? Because remember, we called it revalidate over here, right? We called it revalidate.js. And then we're going to pass in that secret, right, as a parameter. So we're going to say secret equals testing. For alias, we can just say like Swell webhook for on-demand ISR. And we don't need a description. For events, now we can choose, Swell allows us to choose what specific events we want this webhook to fire on, which is cool. So we can just say like product.updated. So we want it when there's new product updates, and we're going to go ahead and save after we get this domain. So let's go back to Vercel, and there we go. The deployment has finished, and we can, there we go. You get some confetti. We can click over here and see that this is our application. It's working. It's great. Like this is deployed on the internet. We can click on it. We can check out. We can do things here. I'm going to just go back. But yeah, this is the URL that we get. So we're going to go back to Swell, and we're going to paste this URL instead of domain.com. Oh God. And I don't know what happened, but let's just do that again. API says revalidate, and then we're going to do that secret equals testing on demand ISR webhook, and we'll select the product.updated event, and then we'll press save changes. Okay, great. Now we'll go back to our products, and yeah, let's go into our application over here. So now, now what will happen is that Swell is listening for that webhook, right? So what happens is if I go in here and I update a product, let's say our iced latte, I'm going to add some exclamation points and question marks here, and I'm going to change the price to something ridiculous like $100. And then I'm going to go ahead and save the product. So when I click save, what happens is the Swell webhook is listening and it says, okay, a product has been updated. I'm going to trigger that API endpoint, the revalidate API endpoint. And then it's going to come over here. It's going to trigger this revalidate endpoint. This is going to, it's going to do that authentication. It's going to say, okay, does the secret match? Yes, it matches. Okay, let me now regenerate the index page and that specific products page. So if we go back to our main application and we reload, we can, one second, did I save? We have iced latte over here. I will, ooh, it is not working. Interesting. Let me go see what I did. Let us see what's going on. So we pushed our coffee app over here to Vercel. We went into our, where is it, webhooks. And let's see what I did here. /API/revalidate. We have our secret is testing. And yeah, it says failed attempts, which is very interesting why it failed. Let's go. It says also it's saying invalid token. Interesting. This is actually good. We can troubleshoot this live. Let me check this chat. I think you missed a key value pair when you were deploying. Yeah, I think you're right. Because we ran into this error, that means that this authentication didn't work, which means that our secret, which is testing, didn't equal this environment variable. It's revalidate secret. So let's go back to our deployed application on Vercel and look at our environment variables, because it probably has something to do with that. Let's go to settings and we'll go to environment variables and we'll go down and see, oh, there it is. I somehow forgot to add that specific environment variable, which is weird. I could have sworn I added it. I must have just like not pressed add or something. So yeah, thank you, Obaid. I appreciate it. So in here, we're gonna go ahead and add this environment variable or validate secret, and the value is just gonna be testing and add. And we added the environment variable successfully, which is great. We're gonna have to, let's just trigger a redeploy just to be safe, right? We're going to redeploy. Yeah, I've done this a million times, and every single time I run into a new issue or something that I forgot to do. But it's good to troubleshoot live, right? Because we saw that Swell actually told us that the webhook has failed. We saw the error message. We troubleshooted it, and we went and kind of saw everything that was happening, which is great. So while I wait for Vercel to rebuild, I'm gonna open up Q&A and see if there's anything else in there. It looks like we are good. If you all have any more questions, drop them down in Q&A. Yeah, exactly. It shows us how easy it was to troubleshoot too, which is cool. So after this is done, okay, it looks like it's done. All right, so this is done. We'll go to our coffee app. We'll click on it. All right, so obviously we get that iced latte, but that's because we rebuilt. We cheated a little bit there. Let's go back to Swell and we will go to products and let's go to our like espresso, for example, and then we'll say espresso and then like put a bunch of exclamation points and make the list price $100 or like $200. Let's do that. $200. We're going to go ahead and save the product. And again, it will do that authentication. It will trigger that revalidate endpoint, and then it should revalidate our page, right? So if we go down here, this is an old version. Where's the newest version? This is an old version too. This is the newest version. Okay, so if we go over here and we reload the page, we should see that espresso, look at that, espresso changes. We didn't have to rebuild, you didn't have to do anything. We can go and we can change whatever we want, and instantaneously it will change in our application. And again, this is while the whole site is static, right? This is like an extremely fast site, static site that's updating content on demand through ISR, which is really cool. But yeah, on-demand ISR for the win. That is it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for listening to me. for how long is it now? 45 minutes. I appreciate it, everybody. Again, this is kind of, we basically just scratched the surface of what we can do. But you can see in the span of 45 minutes, we built a whole e-commerce application. We evaluated different Next.js rendering methods, and we implemented on-demand ISR. And you could do so much more with Swell, specifically with like subscriptions and discounts and checkout flows and all that kind of stuff. And then you also likely want to add, you know, some more advanced things like third-party scripts, like Affirm for enabling customers to pay later, and Klaviyo for cart abandonment and everything. And you can also do this in a performant way using something like the Next.js script component. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening to my talk. Feel free to check out the GitHub repo, which actually let me put on the screen over here. And if you all have any questions, please feel free to drop them in Q&A. I try to get through them as I went, but yeah, I'll take any final questions here, and then we can wrap up. And this is the repo. It's like netlope/nextjs-swell. I'll drop it in the chat as well, so everybody has it. Thank you. Cool. I'm going to give it another 10 seconds for questions, and then if I don't get any more, then we can wrap up. And if you all want to contact me or anybody, you can contact me on Twitter, netlope.com/ or twitter.com/netlope. I've been speaking for way too long. My DMs are open. I'm happy to answer any questions. My email, I'm also available at my email, or so you can email Hassan@vercel.com or productadvocates@vercel.com if you're interested in Vercel and want to talk more to us. But yeah, any of these methods are perfect. I'm more than happy to help you out or answer any questions.